Let me rock it, that's all I wanna do. Shaka Khan, let me rock Shaka Khan. Let me rock it, let me feel for you. Shaka Khan, what you tell me what you wanna do? Do you feel for me?
Good morning, Dan and Amy.
Wait, we gotta wait for it. Ready? Here we go.
Faisal Khan. Faisal Khan. Faisal Khan. Faisal Khan, let me rock you, Faisal Khan. Let me rock you, that's all I want to do. Faisal Khan, let me rock you, Faisal Khan.
Faisal Khan.
I'm sure he appreciates that he's got theme music now. He's on the show enough, he's doing enough good investigative work that I thought he deserved theme music. Just like I'm going to get you sucker, you should have theme music. You should walk around City Hall with a boombox playing our rendition of Shaka Khan with the Faisal Khan overlay.
Now, you've seen the movie I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker?
Oh, it's one of the best movies ever.
I love that movie. We actually saw it.
Oh, the Wayans brothers? Genius. Absolute genius. All right, well, we got to talk some serious Chicago politics. I mean, to the extent it should be taken seriously. I mean, it's only, your quality of life, the cost of living in the city, your safety,
kids are educated.
Quality of your kids' schools. I mean, it's not like it's important stuff, but we'll go ahead and talk about it anyway with Faisal Khan, who is the CEO of Project 6, former legislative inspector general for the Chicago City Council. Faisal, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Every time I come on your show, I want that music on every single time.
Okay,
you're honored.
We didn't offend you by singing it either, right? Like Faisal Khan. Have you heard that before?
Are you kidding?
Have you heard it before?
Are you kidding? That was just awesome. Can I tell you, as a kid, I didn't realize that Shaka Khan was a woman, because when I first heard that song, I thought it was a guy, and it took me a while to figure out who actually sang that song. But great song.
Yeah. All right. Well, you're welcome. All right, now you have to give us something. You have to give us an explanation of what happened to
the choo-choo train guy.
Long-standing reformer Forrest Claypool.
Used to be in charge of CTA, then was in charge of something else, then CPS.
Yeah, he's the
fungible guy that just moves around.
He's the inside guy who said every department head position that is available under the combined mayors Daley and Tiny Dancer over the last 20 years, but he's a reformer. Well, the reformer, as Larry Bloom once said, in Chicago, the reformers go to jail. This time, the reformer just lost his job as superintendent of Chicago Public Schools. But he's still a good guy, because I know that because Tiny Dancer said so, and he made a mistake, and it's not that big a deal, and we'll remember him fondly. Right, Faisal?
Maybe not as much, Dan. I probably will not remember him that fondly, because what he did was egregious, and he deserved to lose his job for his actions. He lied to law enforcement about his conduct. He wasted taxpayer money on trying to get legal opinions to justify the hiring of a friend, and gave that friend lots of money, including the firm that his friend worked for, lots of money, and he rightfully needed to resign or be terminated.
Well, who was that friend? What was the firm, and what was the work that he was paying him for? Or was there any work?
No, basically, Mr. Claypool decided that he wanted to hire a lawyer named Ronald Marmer. And Mr. Marmer has worked with Mr. Claypool for a long time. And except that Mr. Marmer was coming from Jenner and Block. Jenner and Block is a law firm that's also hired by CPS to do legal work for them. And so Mr. Marmer was in charge of ordering Jenner and Block, giving them instructions and supervising them and telling them what to do. Here's the twist. General Block is still paying Mr. Marmer at a tune of $200,000 in severance money.
So
multiple revenue streams. What's the big deal?
It's just basically money being passed around between all of them. And that would be what most you and I or most people would identify as a conflict of interest.
Well, isn't it a crime, though? I mean, can they get him on something... other than...
We'd have to dig a little deeper into that, Amy, but it's worthy of a conversation, certainly. But at the very least, that agreement should never have taken place, because it is a clear conflict of interest. And 6 out of 7 lawyers said so to Mr. Claypool, who remained undeterred and finally found a 7th lawyer who said, no, that should be okay. Go ahead and do this. That's not accurate.
Yeah, that appointed school board, Tiny Dancer's appointees to the Chicago Public School Board, they're on the stick as usual, just like they were with Barbara Byrd Bennett, huh?
Yeah, well, Barbara Byrd Bennett certainly won. And then on top of that, so he goes ahead and hires Mr. Marmer, and when the Inspector General for CPS finds out about it and has a problem with it and brings Mr. Claypool in for a conversation, Mr. Claypool lies. Mr. Claypool lies, denies certain things, says he didn't adjust invoices, spend taxpayer dollars, and the IG calls him out on it. And Mr. Claypool eventually admits he engaged in wrongdoing. And instead of firing him immediately because he's the trust of all taxpayers and individuals, the mayor stands beside him and actually says we should think highly of Mr. Claypool because he's a stand-up guy for admitting his mistake.
But he's not a stand-up guy, and he's going to land somewhere else. So what other, a water reclamation district? I mean, I'm trying to think what job he's going to get next.
The reality is the story isn't any more about Forrest Claypool than it is about Rahm Emanuel. We've had a mayor who campaigned hard about transparency, and if you look at his career now at City Hall, has acted in every way but in any transparent form. He's fought lawsuit against lawsuit about transparency. He used private email to keep business away from taxpayers to let them know what's going on. He's engaged in shady deals we know nothing about. And now he's standing by people who clearly should not have city employment. Two of his former executives have ended up in jail, including Barbara Bird Bennett and Amr Ahmed, his former controller. We really need to have a hard look at this and decide whether we have a mayor acting in taxpayer interests or not.
Yeah, that sounds like the resume for a third term to me. I can't wait for 2019. Let me ask you this, Faisal, with respect to moving to another one of the Cornish Democrats in charge of the state, Mike Madigan. This 4-part series on the property tax system in Cook County that Jason Grotto did in the Chicago Tribune, which is very good. And now the suits that have been filed against Cook County Assessor Joe Barrios, who has 4 generations of Barrioses at least on the Cook County Assessor's payroll. The numbers are staggering. And you want to talk about inherent conflict of interest. So these property tax appeals for law firms like Madigan, Getzendanger, that's Mike Madigan, between 2011 and 2016, according to Grotto's research, total initial value appealed of all of their clients, $8.6 billion. Reductions granted by the assessor, $1.7 billion. You know what the fees are on those kind of reductions over the course of 5 years? You're talking about, I don't know, maybe upwards of $500 million in legal fees over 5 years with the reductions Madigan and Getzendaner were able to get their clients. And just a couple rungs down the ladder is Clafter and Burke, as in Finance Committee Chairman Ed Burke, longtime alderman on the city council, $4.7 billion in total initial value appealed, $865 million in reductions granted by the assessor. These guys who directly or indirectly write and influence the property tax classification system, the property tax laws in this state, and then are part of this scam to enrich themselves on the spread. This seems to me a ripe area for all kinds of additional investigation building off Jason Grotto's, because what happens with this relief that is obtained by the clouded is it's passed on as burdens to the unclouded.
It is absolutely ripe for investigation. Here's my 2 cents on this, Dan, Amy. Simply that, how is it that we have state officials and local officials working against the fiduciary interests of the city? They have a responsibility as an elected official in furtherance of city interests, and by actively taking on clients to fight taxes here in the city of Chicago, which necessarily, listen, I don't have a problem with fighting taxes, but this idea that they are, while at one hand working for government and collecting a salary from taxpayers, then at the same time working for private clients who are working actively against the government, is an inherent conflict of interest. And how this has been going on for so long is mind-blowing. It makes just absolutely no sense. You've got both sides. You're working both sides at this point, and the only people getting cheated are the people in the middle, like you, me, when we see our taxes go up every year on property taxes to make up for these other reductions that are taking place.
And so on that topic, one more, since this was a previous investigation you did that we discussed with you. Proco Joe Moreno, Proco Gropo Joe Moreno.
He wants to be Congress.
Yeah,
he wants to go to Washington, D.C. now.
Trying to level up to backfill El Gaito's congressional seat That would be one way to sort of get rid of him, I guess, is to kick him upstairs. What do you think?
Do we have to kick him upstairs? Is there another direction we can have a conversation
kick him out?
about?
Well,
Yeah, that's a better direction. No, look, 11 people have come out for Mr. Gutierrez's seat, so that's going to be an interesting election next year. Just so you know, Mr. Strauss's lawsuit against the city has not been dismissed, like Mr. Moreno claimed it would be, and we're going to end up footing that bill too for Mr. Moreno's egregious actions.
So this is
I'd like him out of the city. I don't know if the state or the federal jurisdiction would probably be my first choice of where to send him.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the federal jurisdiction, maybe the penal system. This story is just to refresh people's recollection. Him shaking down the owner of a building where the double door was, that double door kicked out as a tenant because they weren't paying their rent, $100,000 in arrears. And Moreno went to them and said, "You're going to put the double door in there, and you're going to only charge them this amount because the double door owners are friends of his." And now this guy has this pending suit against the city. But is there any more investigation, particularly of a law enforcement nature, going into that obvious shakedown, part of which was caught on video?
That's a great question, Dan, and I'm not privy to what the FBI or the state attorney's office is looking at. But the reality is this isn't a one-time occurrence. You know, many aldermen are involved in this type of conduct, and I'm hoping that authorities are looking at this stuff because it's clearly an abuse of aldermanic privilege and title. And just it wasn't just that Double Door were friends of Joe Moreno. They raised money for Joe Moreno.
Right.
They were fundraisers for him. So this is a pure financial deal for all sides, except for Mr. Strauss, like you noted, who was owed $100,000. Now, can you imagine any landlord who can go about and rent free to people, you know, and be owed $100,000? That's just not realistic. And so, that of all the players in this, he's the one who gets the short end of the stick.
But it's so weird.
Has to fight back.
Because I saw Proco Joe recently, and he doesn't seem bothered at all by this. He said, "No, I did the right thing. Those are my friends. I got to stick up for my buddies." And I said, "Well, just because they're your buddies doesn't mean that they can escape out on paying the rent."
No, the law.
But he's under this. Honestly, he lives in a different stratosphere, different world.
No, he doesn't. He lives in the feudal system that's Chicago, and in the feudal system, if you're friends with a feudal lord, the laws don't apply. That's how it works. Isn't that right, Faisal?
Unfortunately, Dan.
Faisal,
it's just a culture we're not able to shake still, and we have to keep fighting and keep pushing back.
he is former legislative inspector general for the Chicago City Council. There's a thankless job. The CEO of Project 6, doing all these independent investigations like the ones we've described. Faisal Khan, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good talking to you guys as always. Thanks.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to